On this video, you'll find out what I think about money, why working hard is important, and how to get ahead in business. Hi, this is Jonathan J, and on this video, you'll see an interview that I did with Graham Rowan for the TV show Money and Me. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to Money and Me. My guest this week is one of Britain's most prolific entrepreneurs. He's bought and sold 25 companies in the last 20 years and made a significant amount of money in the process. His name is Jonathan J. Jonathan, welcome to Money and Me.
Thank you.
It seems the entrepreneur gene struck quite early. I think you had your first business card at the age of 11. What was that all about?
I did. Well, my hobby was doing magic tricks, conjuring. So I had a magic show that I sold to parents, and I did birthday parties for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10-year-olds. Sometimes they were actually close to my age, which was a bit odd. Everyone thought I was older than I was, but I needed a business card, I needed promotional material, I advertised in the local newspaper every Friday, and I ran it like a proper business. And actually did a lot of the things that many business owners don't do, even decades older, but it came very instinctively. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the thrill of building the business, and that was the start.
So how did that come about? Was it something to do with the family environment that you were brought up in that encouraged that kind of entrepreneurial spirit?
Not really. I had a magician at my birthday party when I was 6 or 7, and that was what inspired me to be interested in that subject. My parents always had their own business. They had a dance school, so they'd always worked for themselves. I don't think they necessarily considered it as a business, more of a self-employed status, and there is a psychological difference, if nothing else. However, it was a modest business, but I didn't ever see my parents walk out the door at 9 o'clock in the morning, come home at 5 o'clock. There was never that regularity. And I've never had that regularity in my life either. It's always been a little bit more exciting, shall we say.
So was money ever discussed around the dinner table in the family?
No, never. And if it was typically lack of money. It wasn't a particularly affluent environment. I don't think we ever went without food or clothes, not to that extreme. However, it was, we had holidays, but it certainly wasn't the environment where money was talked about openly, which I think is something that I'd want to do differently with my children.
Okay. So you said you'd had an exciting life. I mean, have you ever had a proper job working for someone else?
The closest I've ever got is as a student, where I worked as a demonstrator, a magician demonstrator in Harrods and Hamleys on Saturdays and I think Wednesdays. And that was the closest I got to having a pay slip and a paycheck every month. That was for a couple of years on and off. But apart from that, never ever worked for anyone else.
Okay, so you went to university and I think started studying French, but got a bit bored with that after a while, did you?
Well, I didn't really want to do French. I just landed with a French degree because the one I wanted I couldn't get into. So I did it a little bit reluctantly and then realised that I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to spend, it was a 4-year degree, I didn't want to spend 4 years studying something I wasn't that interested in. So I quit after a year and started doing my own thing.
And what was that? What was your first business enterprise as a grown-up?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
I don't often talk about this, Graham. So for 5 years, I worked, and I don't think you know this, I worked as a professional stage hypnotist.
Wow.
So I toured all the universities in the UK. So I just specialised in the university student union market because the person who taught me, that was what he did. Yeah. So I sold myself into the universities. This was pre-internet, pre-home computing to a certain degree. I had all the names and telephone numbers of the university student unions on file cards. 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd start phoning, and I would put the cards into different piles according to phone them back later, not until next week. and I would just phone, sell myself on the phone, sell the show on the phone, send off the contract, typed it with a typewriter, send off the contract, get it back in the post with my stamped addressed envelope.
Yeah.
And I was doing okay. I think I was doing 100,000 a year. This was 25 years ago. Wow. As a 21-year-old, selling myself into the unis.
That's a brilliant model, but I suppose ultimately not very scalable if you're also the one that having to go on stage.
Well, that was the issue, because if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. And on one particular occasion, I was unwell, which doesn't happen very often, but I was ill, possibly self-induced illness, and I couldn't work. I couldn't do the show, and if I didn't do the show, I didn't get paid. So it was actually a lousy business model, and that's what made me realise that I needed a business that made me income even when I wasn't there.
Right. Okay. So obviously having the realization is one thing, but then having the smarts to find such a business is quite another. So what process did you go through, and what kind of business did you end up in?
Well, it wasn't particularly scientific. I just wanted to be in business, and I didn't really mind what business it was, but it actually made sense to do something that I was familiar with, that I understood, a market that I understood, and I understood student unions, and I understood how the entertainment in student unions was booked, and I realised that every student union I went to had filing cabinets full of rather average marketing material for bands, comedians, all the things that you would have in a student union or at summer balls, Christmas balls. So I put together a magazine where I could sell advertising space to all the people who would send materials through the post to student unions, sold them advertising space, and then sent that magazine free of charge to all the student unions. Very similar to what Richard Branson did with his student magazine when he was a student.
He seemed to do okay with it.
He did all right, yeah.
How did yours go?
Well, not so well. Because I realised that the people placing the advertising were terrible at paying their bills. So I always was owed lots of money, and I had all my costs up front. So again, it wasn't a great model, but it taught me a lot.
Okay, but I think from that, you actually then became one of the first and most successful people to bring the whole concept of coaching into the UK. How did you break through the apathy? Because I've often found that Brits are very reluctant to accept the need for coaching.
Yeah, so so this was 1998, 1999. Coaching, I sit in a Costa Coffee and hear people talking about coaching, and not sports coaching, executive coaching, business coaching, life coaching, which you never would have heard 20 years ago. But I was on an exhibition stand with another one of my magazine titles, which was a corporate hospitality magazine, because they were better at paying their bills, but it was more competitive, so again wasn't a great business model. And I was on this stand for 3 days opposite an American coaching company, and it was a very quiet exhibition. And as tends to happen at quiet exhibitions, you speak to everyone else because there's no one else to speak to. So I'm speaking to the other exhibitors, and they said, well, we're part of this American coaching university, I think they called it. And I said, well, why did you go to America? Why didn't you do it in the UK? And they said, well, no one does it in the UK. And I found out that they charged, I think it was $3,000, which was about £2,000 at the time. So I had another magazine in my little stable of titles, which was on personal development. I went to all the people who wrote articles for me on personal development and said, could you run a coaching course? I'll go and find the clients. You put together the training program, and it'll be a winning combination. So as a result of that, we did our first training program in October 1999, so just about 20 years ago. It was a storming success, changed my financial life in one weekend. I went from having nothing, lots of credit card debt and not being able to pay my mortgage. I mean, it was pretty critical, really. I went from -0 to £20,000 in the bank across the course of a week. My bank manager was on holiday that week. He phoned me up when he got back. He said, Jonathan, what's happening? Something must have happened in the last week. Yeah, you've gone from -20 to +20. What's happening? And that was the very first training course, and I ran those training courses every month for 7 years, and then sold the company to a private equity firm.
Fantastic. Well, after the break, I want to go into your whole new career as a buyer and seller of businesses. So for now, Jonathan, thank you very much. Join us again in a few minutes. Before the break, we learned about how Jonathan's business career had got off to a flying start when he sold his coaching business. Now let's turn to what's really made his name, which is as a buyer and seller of lots of different companies. So, Jonathan, it seems to me that having sold those first few businesses, you kind of got a taste for the deal rather than perhaps for simply running businesses the way most people do.
Well, what most people do is they say that they own a business, and technically they do. They own the shares in the company. However, they actually live their lives as business operators. So they fulfill a management role. Now, that's a very important role in a business, but I don't think it should be the role conducted by the owner of the business because it's very limiting. It means that you spend your day answering the phone, creating invoices, signing for deliveries, changing the ink in the photocopier machine, and all of these types of operational activities where the real skill that a business owner should have is as an investor in businesses and growing their company, perhaps by acquisition. And I learnt that I could make more money selling a business than I could from running a business. I could grow my business and double its value. And with the coaching business that we talked about, I doubled its value and I added millions to the value by acquiring competitors. And not actually spending very much acquiring those competitors, but instead of just taking little bunny hops in my business, hire another advertising person, hire another salesperson, I actually took huge kangaroo leaps and I made millions more as a result. And you know what? It wasn't difficult. In actual fact, it was very easy, it was fun, and it wasn't stressful.
Wow, okay. So this, I think, in a sense, was a revelation for you, and it's now one that you try and help other people to achieve by coaching them in how to go around buying and selling businesses.
Yeah, I do that one day a week. Right. So one day of every week is blocked out to help other business owners do what I do and what I have done. And I either do that in a group setting or I do it on a one-to-one basis. But I spend 20% of the working week helping other people, and I spend 4 days of the working week doing it myself.
Right, okay. So obviously you spend a lot of time with business owners, and what are the kind of mistakes you see them making that ultimately will have a detrimental impact on their long-term wealth?
Oh, that's a very good question, and extremely relevant, because I was actually with 2 people wanting to sell their business to me yesterday afternoon. And as I was listening to them, I realized that the attitude of the owner of a business will influence their exit value. And the attitude that is typically missing, that devalues the business for them, is having focus and clarity. And when a business owner has focus and clarity about what they do, who they sell to, and why people should buy from them, it actually increases the value of their business. Number one, because they have a better business. It runs with more focus and clarity, and therefore more successfully and more profitably. But secondly, when you are selling your business, if you can't explain to someone why they should buy your business, quite frankly, why should they buy it? And I meet 5 or 6 business owners every week who want to sell. So I hear the same things again and again and again. And what I look for is that clarity of purpose.
Right, okay. Well, it's an important point there to anyone watching us that wants to sell their business. Now, obviously, in doing all these deals, you've managed to make a few bob. What sorts of investments have you made outside of the business world to secure that long-term wealth?
I've only ever made one investment, and that's in property. And I started doing this just the way many people do. When you move house, you don't sell the house, you rent it out, and then you move again and you keep it and you rent it out. And I did that, so I became the accidental landlord. And what I didn't have, which I would encourage anyone to get, is an education in how to invest. Because I just made it up as I went along. So I made lots of mistakes. I made some poor decisions that I could have avoided with the right level of education. And I just muddled my way through it with not much of a strategy. But I acquired a decent-sized portfolio over the years. It then shrunk again, and now it's growing again. And I don't know much about other things, but I understand property really through trial and error, but I wish if someone had taught me how to do it, then I'd have been a lot smarter.
Okay. And I guess one of the aspects that comes into some of the business deals you do is that if there's a commercial property attached to the business, suddenly that gives you a few more options.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have several property investors who are clients, and they're looking at property not just, or rather looking at businesses, not just for the business, but for the property angle as well. So maybe it's an MOT test centre that comes with a large site and a profitable business. Maybe it's a pub-type business where you've got an investment in the future where you can develop it and turn it into flats. Whatever it might be. So there's two angles to a business and a property investment playing in parallel with each other.
Okay, and any particular investment mistake you'd own up to that people watching us might learn from?
There's probably been so many. It's hard to select one. I can give you a broad mistake that I've certainly made, and I see other people make, which is where you get emotionally attached to an investment. You do it because you want the stroking of your ego. It feels like something that you can brag about rather than something that's backed up by common sense and numbers. And I see people say, I really want to buy that business, and they can't actually justify why they should buy it, but they know that they want it. And I've probably pursued things irrationally, and typically the less rational you are and the more emotional you are, the poorer the decision making is.
No, absolutely. Okay. So, is there anything that keeps you awake at night? Is it Brexit? Is it politics? What worries you?
Well, rather selfishly, I pay more attention to my own personal economy than the economy of a country that really I can't influence too much. So I do sleep very well at night. But if I was to worry or be concerned, it's because I know what not having any money is like. I know what it's like to be completely broke. So I always have this fear of loss, perhaps. So I keep on going. I never want to stop. So I never talk about retirement. I never talk about early retirement. I never talk about, when people say, when are you going to hang your hat up? No, I love what I do. Why should I stop doing something that I love doing? So and it's not really about the money. It's about a benchmark. It's about the game, if you like.
Okay, lovely. Now, you relatively recently became a father. What do you intend to teach your daughter about finance, and at what sort of age do you think you'll start that conversation?
Well, I think it's being comfortable with money and not telling your children that money is a bad thing or it's the root of all evil and all these phrases that can set people along the wrong path. And it's certainly not about worshipping money, but it's about respecting the fact that the money that you earn is a reflection of the value that you bring. And the more value you bring, the more people return that with money that you can then do other things with. And it's about creating security. It's about giving yourself choices, about giving your family choices, giving your friends choices. It's about having choice and freedom.
Okay, but I suppose what I'm getting at is that, in a sense, she will inherit a lifestyle perhaps a lot more prosperous than you did when you were a child. And is there a way in which you have to try and avoid that changing her in any sort of negative way?
I think it's about the environment that you grow up in, about keeping your feet on the ground and realising that just because you have money or you have access to money doesn't make you a special person. It just means that you've been fortunate, and you should respect the fact that you've been fortunate and put it to work. I mean, learning the basics of investing is absolutely essential, I think, to any child.
Okay, so finally, so our time together has shot by incredibly quickly, but you've said you're not ready for retirement. What's left on the kind of Jonathan J. bucket list of things you want to do in life?
Several lifetimes worth of things. I'm learning every day. There's always something exciting round the corner. I've always got several balls in the air at any one point. So every year the answer to that question will be different, but I'm certainly not going to stop anytime soon.